ships. Full dress uniform, British soldiers. Full dress uniform, and very impressive, very ostentatious, very intimidating, which was the goal. And these soldiers started making a lot of noise. They started yelling and shoving people around, causing some trouble. And then all of a sudden they get in formation. They march up the Long Wharf towards Boston Common. They set up camp. They started the occupation of Boston. So what's going on here in 1768? See, the people who were here in 1768, most of these people here, most of these families are here 100 years, 120, 140 years, some of them more. And they're all British citizens. This is the British colony. Not everybody is from England, but they're all British citizens. Most of them are proud to be so. And they're happy to be helping to expand the British Empire, to be an outpost in the British Empire, trying to expand the British influence in the New World here. And they've got nobody representing them in Parliament, but they figure that'll come in time. They're okay with it. And they're paying local taxes, they're obeying rules and regulations, and they've got outrageous trade laws and things imposed on them, but they figure it's all for the better good. Everybody's good. 1750s, George III becomes king. He's got some wars going on. It's going to cost him more than he expected. He's got other cost overruns. As far as he's concerned, he's the king of the world, and these people are his mere subjects, and he and Parliament get together. They figure they can impose any sort of anything. They can stick that chest out and impose rules and regulations and taxes on them as they choose. They're going to pay for all their debts through these people. But now these people here, now all of a sudden, they're frustrated. You know, they've got nobody representing them in Parliament, which wasn't a problem before. Now it's a problem because there's nobody to negotiate for them. They're being bullied. They're being shoved around. A lot of people start to protest. The loudest protests were coming from Boston. That's why 4,000 soldiers showed up specifically here that October morning. Their goal in 1768 was to come here for a few months, put down a burgeoning rebellion before it got too far off the ground, make an example of the people of this town, knock around a few heads, and then leave here as quick as they could, leaving nothing but terror in the hearts of anybody who would try to start a rebellion again. That was their goal in 1768. 1775, 7 years later, we had more than 100 of those British ships here. We had 10,000 British soldiers in Boston. Not only did they not have a handle on this burgeoning rebellion, they were fanning the flames like this just because they're here. Then the April of 75, the battles at Lexington and Concord took place, 15, 20 miles from here. At the end of those battles, colonial troops had pushed the British soldiers all the way back to Boston, pinned them down here at the Long Wharf with their 100 ships for the next 11 months. 15,000 colonials surrounded the wharf. British couldn't move any further on the land. They could have gone out to sea. They could have gone home. They stuck around. They're still thinking they're going to put down a burgeoning rebellion. But George Washington was in Boston back then. George was sick of looking at him. Now, George had 50 British cannons up at Fort Ticonderoga in New York. They had been captured from the British a few months earlier. Henry Knox went and got those 50 cannons, hauled them 300 miles back to Boston in the middle of the winter, and it took them weeks. Finally got those 50 cannons back to Boston, aimed them at the 100 ships here at the Long Wharf, told the British he would destroy them, blow them out of the water with their own cannons if they didn't leave by the next day. Early morning hours of March 17th, not a shot was fired. Sailors and soldiers scrambled down here to get on their ships. British loyalists clambered down here. The ships hightailed it off the wharf. They headed up to Canada. The war ended in Massachusetts. It continued for about 7 years otherwise, but ended here. And there's a reason why not a shot had been fired here that day, something the British didn't know. See, Henry Knox went and got those 50 cannons at Fort Ticonderoga, hauled them all the way back to Boston. Two things Henry did not haul back to Boston: cannonballs and gunpowder. Nobody said a thing about it to the British. They thought that left. They thought that'd be destroyed, so they left. That's how the war ended in Massachusetts here at the Long Wharf. Anyway, this is the North End down here. This is the oldest neighborhood in Boston. Now, the first long-term European settlers here, John Winthrop and 700 Puritans, arrived in 1630, looking to practice their Puritan religion and make money, reality life. Back then, this area was known as the Shawmut Peninsula, place of clear water, as it loosely translates in the Algonquin language. A little bitty piece of land. A couple of square miles, all it really was, really. It was more of an island than a peninsula. Most of it was rock and swamp. Even the Indians didn't spend a long time here. But the north end of the peninsula, we had a little bit of buildable space, and Boston's inner harbor is deep and surrounded by little protective islands all around it. So they figured they could bring in big ships down here. Well, they could bring in big ships, make a lot of money. It's going to be one of these days. And, they can bring in big ships, make a lot of money. Before they know it, they had one of the most successful ports on the colonial coast. 1765, secret meetings started to take place down here in back rooms and alleys and basements. Samuel Adams, John Hancock, Paul Revere, Joseph Warren, all these people and many others involved in these meetings. And they were held in response to all these new taxes and rules and regulations that the king was imposing upon them, the king and parliament was imposing upon them, and the Stamp Act being the first of them. So from these secret meetings came the Sons of Liberty. They were the first group to strongly oppose British oppression. And from the Sons of Liberty came the American Revolution. The whole thing began right here. Since about 1910, though, the North End here is mostly associated with Italian Americans and Italian immigrants. And some people, mostly tourists, call this area Little Italy. You'll find more than 100 Italian restaurants and pastry shops right here in a half-mile square. Now stops 2, 3, and 5 will take you into the North End. This is stop number 2. Anyone stop number 2? Stop number 2. Over there. Now, along with Italian restaurants and pastry shops, the Freedom Trail comes through the North End. It's a 2.5-mile trail. It was created in the 1950s, and it takes you to some of the historic sites in town. And as the Freedom Trail comes into the North End, it goes to the Old North Church. I'm going to point that out shortly and tell you about it when we can see it. The Freedom Trail also goes down the very narrow North Street to the home of Paul Revere, great patriot. Revere was a courier for the cause of the American Revolution. He was in his 40s when he was carrying secret messages on horseback up and down the entire East Coast. By trade, Revere was a metalsmith and a carpenter. And on the side, he did a little amateur dentistry. Revere's home in the North End is the oldest wooden structure in downtown Boston. It was built in 1677 for Cotton Mather of the Preaching Mathers family. Revere bought it in 1770. He lived there about 30 years, and while he lived there, Revere fathered 16 children. 8 with each of 2 wives, yeah? One historian said of Paul Revere, he wasn't a tall man, but he was a busy man.
How many wives?
2. His first wife called him the original Minuteman. There, I apologize.
No apologies.
Keep going, I like that.
Anyway, speaking of Paul Revere, a short distance down, we're going to pass an alleyway. And what we do, we're going to look up, we'll see the steeple of Christ Church, the Old North Church. It was built in 1723. Now, the British locked the thing up in the 1770s. They're thinking these Sons of Liberty would end up using the thing as a secret meeting house. The janitor had the keys, though. 23-year-old Robert Newman lived in a rooming house across the street from the church. And his mother operated the rooming house. And British soldiers, while they were here, they were either put up in the homes of colonists, so they had to live on tents on Boston Common, or rent rooms. And Bobby Newman's mother rented to British soldiers. So April 18, 1775 was a Tuesday. Previous couple of days, there had been the British soldiers were clearly up to something. They had an operation. They were planning some sort of an operation, and the Sons of Liberty there, some of these people who were involved in the Committee of Safety, as they call themselves, as a cover. They were gathering information about what the British were up to. So April 18, 1775, Bobby Newman had to get out of that rooming house without soldiers knowing what he was up to. He went out an upper story window in the back of the building.